Actually, you can do that.
Oh, there you go. Yep.
I'm recording, Vito. No worries.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to USF Friday Transportation Seminar Series. And for those not know me, my name is Yu Zhang. I'm a professor in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. I'm also a faculty member affiliated with Carter Center for Urban Transition Research. And this is a transition seminar sponsored by the CE Department, Carter, as well as several UTCs at USF, including NISA, the National Institute for Congestion Reduction, the center, the 3 Tier 1 centers, including the Center for Transition Environment and Community Health. So today, it's my distinct pleasure to have Secretary Kevin Thibault with us today, and he's the Secretary of Florida Department of Transportation since January 2019. And Secretary Thibault has more than 26 years of experience in transportation and worked in private sectors as well as FDOT and taken different leading roles in both sectors. And the Secretary Thibault is very passionate in mentoring the junior professionals as well as the students. And I think that's why he accepted the invitation and presenting our seminar, and we really appreciate that. And Secretary Thibault is leading a lot of efforts for the future Florida transition system and to embracing the advanced technologies, which he will talk about in this presentation. And without further ado, I will welcome Secretary Thibault again. Thank you again for taking precious time from your tight schedule and be with us today. So the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Yu. Thank you for, I'm glad to be here. Glad to talk to, I noticed there's some students here as well as some of our peers in the industry. And so thank you for being a part of this. I know it's a Friday. For some of us, it's the Friday after a holiday. So it makes it a little difficult for people sometimes to attend because they may take the day off. But again, I appreciate everyone being here today. Talk a little bit about transportation here at the state. And as I mentioned to you earlier, definitely open it up at the end for some questions that either that you may have or others may have from either the presentation or just in general. So, we'll want to talk a little bit more about what's going on in the department and how we prepare our transportation system and infrastructure for the future. So next slide. So to give you a little bit of a background, some of you are perhaps not as familiar as others with the Department of Transportation. The Florida Department of Transportation is a governor's agency, so it serves under the pleasure of the Governor DeSantis. As was mentioned earlier, I was appointed by the governor back in January 2019. It is a decentralized agency, which is somewhat different than our sister agencies here in the state of Florida, meaning that a lot of the day-to-day activities as it relates to development of projects and implementation of projects are done by our 7 geographic districts shown here in this map, as well as our Florida Turnpike Enterprise and our Florida Rail Enterprise. So we've got the 7 geographic districts, again, shown in this map. Each one has a district headquarters listed there on the table. And the Turnpike headquarters is located in Central Florida in Orange County, with also an operations office down there in Pompano. So each district is managed by a district secretary. They each one has a little bit of variation in their organizational structure. Some of the urban districts have a little different structure than the urban districts, but they all have primarily operations, development, as well as administration within each one of the districts. They also have a public information office, so that way they have a direct connection to not only the community, but the media markets as well in those geographic districts. And they have district chief counsels that helps to provide legal support to each one of those entities. Next slide. So when I came into the department, back to the department 3 years ago, one of the things I wanted to focus on is evolve our what we've been doing in the past. We have a mission statement that basically says that we are here to focus on moving people and goods throughout the state. And I wanted to kind of develop some core principles and elements to help us do that mission statement. Again, you hear me say I wanted to evolve, not revolutionize what we've done in the past, but really just build upon what was been done. And so we created what we call the vital few. It's an elementary and evolutionary focus for Florida's transportation. If you think about each one of those, it should be day in, day out what we should be focused on. And the first one there, inspiring safety, you'll hear at the department often that our focus has always been on safety. That's our number one priority. We focus our revenues and our resources on that. And so we need to make sure that the safety that we're providing in each one of our transportation modes meets the needs of the state today, as well as the needs of the state in the future. When we talk about enhancing mobility, we recognize that it's not one size fits all. The mobility needs in Tampa Bay are going to be different than they are in the Panhandle, than they are in Miami. And so our team there, and we got each one of these, by the way, have a task team focused on what are those, in this case, mobility options that we can start to develop. And really is whether expansion or enhancement of existing roadways or looking forward to implementing technology solutions, we are committed to building the future needs of Florida today. When we start to talk about inspiring innovation, it's really about how do we plant those seeds of innovation, not only within the department employees, but even with the transportation industry in general. And so it's really fostering that kind of incubation, if you want to call it that, for innovation within the agency. We recently have done and taken a few actions to make sure that we continue to look at beyond technology opportunities to inspire innovation within the agency. And then so the first three are outward facing. Everyone in the industry and in the public can help us improve safety, enhance mobility, and inspire innovation. The fourth one, in fostering talent, is more inward facing. It's more about how can I recruit and retain the best employees within the department so that we can inspire, improve safety, enhance mobility, and inspire innovation. So those are the things that kind of woven into the fabric of this agency, these four items, the vital few. And so as Florida continues to grow, we recently surpassed the 22 million residents here in the state. An additional 800 people a day continue to call Florida home. So regardless of where they decide to live, Florida, we're trying to position the state to make sure that the decisions related to mobility and the demands that our residents have, that the 130 million visitors annually that we see will be guided by the principles of the vital few. So again, we're developing a commitment here with the department, and that the transportation system not only fits to today's needs, but the needs of our growing state in the future. Next slide. So this is the approved budget the department is working on in this current fiscal year that started July 1st, $10.3 billion. It's one of the largest state agencies within the state. We have been, by the way, at $10 billion for a number of years now. The lion's share of that comes in our work program, $9.4 billion, as you see here in the chart. That's how we deliver the projects and the goods and services that it is for the community. And you can see the breakdown here, a lot of different work going on, but I want to make a note that we are truly a multimodal agency. We are a Department of Transportation, and we're not focused just on highways. You can see here that we're providing over 110 million going to our seaport infrastructure enhancements, almost 326 million in aviation improvements, over 700 million going to rail transit program enhancements. And you can see that's, even though it says 172 million for safety, that's those standalone safety improvements that we've identified, whether it be intersection improvements like new signals and so on. But the rest of the projects that we have developed always have some safety component built into that project as well, whether it be the 1 billion in resurfacing or the 2.8 billion for highway construction, which includes 210 new lane miles. So the governor again is, focused on making improvements to our transportation system consistently. And as you saw, even in the past year, he actually asked the legislature, and they accommodated additional funds being given to the department to help enhance our transportation infrastructure. So next slide, please. So how do we fund transportation? A lot of, and I'm sure the students and others that are attending here are very familiar with the sources and uses of transportation, but just to share for some that don't, about half of the resources come from the state level. So our work program that you saw there, half of it comes from state resources, which is primarily the gas tax. People, when you go to the pump and pay the gas, there is some cents on that gas tax that goes to the state for our transportation needs. About a quarter or 25% of our overall program is funded with the federal gas tax that comes back to the state through a appropriation. And then the rest of it is primarily through tolls and or bonding and so on. So again, a large share of the program is controlled by the state and its revenue sources. Next slide. So I've talked about the gas tax, which is basically consumption based. And we all know that there is a migration and shift to getting use of more electric vehicles. And I will tell you, as the gas prices continue to increase because of inflation, there's going to be even more and more people buying either a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle or pure electric vehicles in the very near future. So we are preparing for that shift because it's externally driven. It's not something that the state is doing. It is different other external factors that are making that change, including the automobile manufacturers who have all been out there sharing their commitments to make electric vehicles and be all electric by a certain date, whether it be 2030, 2035, and so on. So what we are seeing here, the internal combustion engine, or ICE, what we're seeing here is the end of the ICE age. We're seeing a definite migration from internal combustion engines to all electric vehicles. So now we need to think about what do we do with the sources of our revenues in order to keep up with the transportation needs of the state. Again, most of it is consumption based of motor fuel. So we need to think about what's that future. And perhaps that future is, again, consumption based, but instead of it being pennies on a gallon, it is pennies on a kilowatt hour. And then we need to think about how do we bridge the gap in between. So there's going to be a lot of discussion that needs to be done. It cannot be done just by Florida only. As I mentioned earlier, with all the visitors that we have in the state, especially a lot of them coming by vehicles, motor vehicles, we've got to think regionally, we got to think nationally to be able to tackle what is that next migration. As you see here in this chart, Florida right now has a very low adoption rate for electric vehicles, but I expect that's going to increase, and it's going to increase dramatically. Just to let you know, the average or the percentage nationally is about 2%. And so you see Florida's got a long way to go to get up to the national average. So as we look at the next future, we got to get ready and position the state for that. Next slide. So Florida's been delivering mobility for over, the Department of Transportation has been delivering mobility for over 100 years. Along the way, mobility has changed, and it's changed quite a bit, and it will continue to evolve. So mobility has a variety of meanings depending on who you talk to, and the differences that lead to our definitions of mobility are going to change. Simply put, mobility is the ability to move. It's getting to work, to school, appointments, running errands, making transportation a part of almost all of our daily activities. So we recognize that our customers are expecting more innovative, safer, and cleaner mobility options in the decades to come. So you're looking for reliable travel times across all modes of our transportation system, seamless mobility within different modes of transportation and between our communities, and making sure that it is accessible, that the accessibility that we provide is safe, convenient, and really, more importantly, affordable. Now, you think about this state. We are home to a very diverse state with bustling urban centers that need multimodal transportation options to supplement the existing highway network that's there, and many rural areas that have completely different transportation needs altogether. So when you think about these different areas, transportation supports and stimulates economic growth. It is also important to realize that regardless of whether one lives in a rural community or a dense urban area, transportation provides a path to jobs, education, healthcare, and other resources. The path just looks a little different depending on where you're living. But our Florida Transportation Plan, which we develop every 5 years or update every 5 years, is really a plan for all of Florida. So when you look at the FTP, it guides Florida's transportation future by providing direction to all parties and stakeholders within the state that are involved in the planning and managing of Florida's transportation system, including our statewide, regional, and local partners. So what we're trying to do is embracing a vision of how transportation needs to work and evolve and accommodate the changing needs of this state. And it all works on 7 interrelated goals for our transportation future and embracing a forward-looking plan for how transportation supports a more competitive, resilient, and sustainable state. So the 7 goals as shown here is safety and security, infrastructure, mobility, accessibility and equity, economy, communities, and environment. Again, really looking forward-looking, not just necessarily looking back. Next slide. And it's again all focused on safety. Safety is and always will be our number 1 priority here at the DOT. Our safety vision is to eliminate transportation-related fatalities and serious injuries for all modes of travel and all transportation users. So here at the department, we've established a target of 0 transportation-related fatalities and serious injuries, and we know that achieving this is not an easy task. It requires commitment, energy, and innovation, not only from the department or within the department, but our traffic partners and the industry across the state as well. While we incorporate safety in everything we do, the department identified 3 focus areas based upon the data that's been shared with us on the different crashes and so on. These 3 included our intersections, lane departures, and pedestrian and bicyclists. Crashes involving at least one of these focus areas contribute to nearly all the fatalities and serious injuries that are in Florida's transportation system. So we have supported the safe system approach and followed guidance from the Federal Highway Administration by prioritizing safe road users, safe vehicles, safe speeds, safe roads, and post-crash care. Again, our target is to get to 0. Next slide. So one way to do that is to try to use innovation and technology. So FDOT's WrongWay Driving Countermeasure Initiative involves a combination of engineering, education outreach, and enforcement preparedness. So the department is developing technical solutions and spreading awareness in addition to working closely with the Florida Highway Patrol to target enforcement in areas where we've seen a significant uptick in wrong-way driving. Say that a few times fast. So wrong-way driving alert systems assist the department in identifying when a driver is going in the wrong direction. The alert system provides artificial eyes to help alert and track drivers that enter an off-ramp when they intend to get onto the freeway. When the alert system detects a wrong-way vehicle, it signals the flash of the wrong-way beacons to encourage the driver to change direction in what was referred to as the warning device activation zone. As you can see here, an alert, is sent, from WrongWay alert system to the RTMCs, regional traffic management systems. An alert will also pop up on the RTMC's operator's workstation. Along the way, the operator determines if immediate action is needed to determine if the alert is confirmed or unfounded. The operator can take further action by notification to law enforcement if a driver continues through the correction zone, and immediate efforts are taken to locate a visual of the WrongWay driver so that on our closed circuit TVs, so that we can get out and get information to our law enforcement partners. We are currently have this use in our District 7 office in the Tampa Bay area, and it's proven its effectiveness. Over the past year, there were 110 confirmed WrongWay events. 41 of them self-corrected because of this WrongWay ramp system in place. This is a great, excellent use of technology and the department and its mission to provide a safe transportation system. Next slide. Excuse me. You know when you have that tickle that just won't go away. Anyway, so we're also looking at modernization of our infrastructure. And so we're pushing to integrate innovative technologies and strategies to bring success to our projects. The department sees the model of autonomous, connected, electric, and shared, or ACES, as a catalyst to improve safety, advancing mobility, and embracing innovation. So in the future, ACES technology will impact land use, travel patterns, freight logistics, vehicle miles traveled, and funding mechanisms, and hopefully provide an entirely new dimension to personal mobility. Next slide. So a roadmap, no pun intended here, or maybe pun is intended, to our department's Transportation System Management and Operations Strategic Plan, or TSMNO. It includes a priority focus area on connected vehicles with a corresponding action plan to conduct regional workshops. These connected and autonomous vehicle, or CAV workshops, were held in 2018 to discuss opportunities, challenges, and roles for delivering the safety and mobility benefits of CAV deployment. So in response to the workshop input, the department adopted a CAV business plan. The department began implementing pilot projects such as the US 90 Signal Phase and Timing, or SPAT, and the Gainesville SPAT Trapezium. The department learned lessons along the way with these deployments, including how our traffic engineering and research laboratory here in Tallahassee was instrumental in testing the roadside units. We updated our specifications for the traffic signal controllers to be compatible with CV technology. We also looked at implementing a developmental specs for our roadside units to facilitate using these devices across the state. FDOT has also sought to leverage funding opportunities with the Federal Highway Administration, in 2017. And so that the department was awarded, or District 5 was awarded, the Connecting the East Orlando Communities, Advanced Transportation and Congestion Management Technologies Deployment Grant. In 2018, the FHWA also awarded the department a accelerated innovation deployment for the Gainesville Pedestrian Bicyclist Connected Vehicle Safety Project. And again, FHWA awarded the I-4 Frame Project a grant in 2020. Safety and mobility goals, by the way, are not just limited to the state highway system. Florida has over 123,000 miles of public roads, and only 12,000 of those are on the state highway system. So again, this is just about under 10% of the total lane miles, centerline miles. But of that, 90% of that also is attributed to the cities, the counties, and other governmental entities. So on the state highway system, just to give you a statistic, there are over 8,600 traffic signals, and we rely on the local agencies to help with the maintenance. So to encourage partnership with our local agencies, the department has developed new partnerships with local agencies initiatives. And the division of these initiatives is that the department districts work with these local agencies to promote the adoption of emerging transportation technologies and expand opportunities for industry partners to work with local agencies. The CAV program has matured quite a bit from pilot projects to full-scale implementation. We're very excited on where it's going. Next slide. So I mentioned a little bit about the CAV business plan. We adopted that in 2019. It implements such strategies or initiatives as smart work zones, statewide security credential management system, first responder safety, signal phase and timing, as I mentioned earlier. We're also developing a major initiative called V2X, a data exchange platform where the information data that are collected from emerging technologies, equipment, as well as the devices will be packaged for road users. Information is to be dispersed by the car companies and other data providers. Fiber optic cable has been installed in our dense urban areas of the state via an ATMS communications contracts. These existing networks are allowing the ability to add CAV projects at a lower upfront cost. Our partnership with the University in Florida on the Ice Street initiative is inviting the industry to work on the emerging technology initiatives. The department is also working with Qatar on ACES initiatives as well. We are also leveraging technologies and deploying roadside equipment, and the department has 100% coverage of ITS systems on all FDOT operated freeways. This coverage provides incident management capabilities as well as providing the foundation for emerging mobility applications. Next slide, please. I got 250 slides more to go, gang, so just be patient with me, see if you're paying attention. So CAV projects in Florida, just to give you a couple of examples, I mentioned the US 90 SPAT project. One of the first of its kind, encompassed 22 signalized intersections on Mahan Drive here in Tallahassee. I mentioned the Gainesville SPAT Trapezium project. The Pinellas County also has a SPAT project, which will broadcast SPAT and MAP at 23 signalized intersections. It is FDOT's first project utilizing cellular to everything, or C-V2X communication. I mentioned frame earlier. There are 3 of them throughout the state. One of them is on I-75. Another one is on I-4, and the third one is on US 41, which consists of 25 intersections from US 41 from north of Airport Road to Pine Island Road. That's down in Southwest Florida. Florida has several AV shuttle deployments as well. One of them is at Lake Nona, located just outside Orlando, or outside the airport area. It has the largest and longest AV network with 5 routes and 8 shuttles. UCF has a pair of AV shuttles that transport travelers along 2 routes on sidewalks that are closed to other vehicle traffic. And our District 5 in Central Florida has 2 CV projects at UCF's campus as well. Again, a lot going on related to connected or automated vehicles. Next slide. So I talked a little bit about electric vehicles and its adoption. The Florida legislature in 2020 under Senate Bill 7018 asked that the department develop and lead the development of an electric vehicle infrastructure master plan to coordinate and also to coordinate, develop, and recommend that master plan for the deployment of electric vehicle charging station infrastructure along the state highway system. So we were very fortunate to lead this effort. We worked with our sister agencies, including the Department of Environmental Protection, as well as the Florida Public Service Commission, on developing this master plan. It was released in July of this year. We were working with our partners to look at identifying future electric vehicle charging station types and locations, identifying barriers to adoption, quantifying revenue impacts, and more importantly, identifying implementation strategies. So the primary objective of the EV Master Plan was to develop that short-range and long-range electric vehicle travel as well as emergency evacuations in this state, adapt state highway infrastructure consistent with the market demand, and ensure availability of adequate and reliable EV charging stations. So the EV Master Plan included 4 focus areas that provide the framework and the strategic action that Florida should consider to achieve the goals and objectives. These include adapt, facilitate, educate, and coordinate. The EV Master Plan supports our Florida Transportation Plan by advancing the use of EVs to improve air quality and foster economic development by encouraging the expansion of the labor force to support the EV infrastructure. We're excited about that. Look forward to working on that as we get to the next phase of implementation. Next slide. So many of us are probably familiar with electric vehicle technology. EV infrastructure is also referred to as EVSE. And so, and the technology piece is very important as it has been one of the barriers to adoption. People cannot wait for hours to charge their vehicles while traveling. There are 3 types of charging technologies currently available in the market. Level 1 is the ones that we use at home. Level 2 currently are dominant in the market for commercial purposes. And the direct current fast charging, or DCFC, is one of those that's evolving. That's the quick chargers that you see in some of the supercharging Tesla that Tesla has been providing. Another charging that's in development right now is the wireless power transfer, as kind of graphically shown on the right side of this slide. Basically, the vehicle gets charged as it drives using in-pavement inductive loop technology. This is evolving rapidly, and FDOT is monitoring this opportunity closely. Fortunately, we have our SunTrax facility there in Auburndale that will be able to test some of this infrastructure in very short order. Next slide. Finally, in the EV Master Plan, we identified kind of the gaps where the infrastructure charging electric infrastructure needs to be put in place. This is just a map that was taken from that master plan where existing publicly accessible EV charging infrastructure is in place today in their locations and by the type, and the possible future, those direct charge fast chargers would be located by priority order. Again, this was kind of the vision of the master plan of kind of looking out, at least in the near-term horizon, what our needs are. But clearly, as this is evolving, we expect that this will be constantly evolving as well as we go into the implementation stage. So with that, next slide. As always in my presentations, next slide. Okay, thank you. I try to leave with a safety message for as many of you we're coming upon that time of year where we travel quite a bit for the holidays, whether it be on long weekends or Thanksgiving coming up shortly or the Christmas holidays. I ask all of you to please pay attention, please be safe, please buckle up, and please don't text and drive. Put it down. It can always wait. So with that, turn it back to you for any questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for this informative presentation. And I remember at the end of your speech on Tuesday night, you also mentioned put down your cell phone and make sure you drive home safe. So thank you for this, always passing the message to the audience. Okay, so now we open floor for the questions. You can either unmute yourself and speak out your question, or you can put your question in the meeting chat. And when you ask a question, you can state yourself, your name, where you, your affiliation, and then go forward with the question.
Hi, Secretary Thibault, Greg Sauter from WGI. How are you?
Hey, Greg, how are you?
Good, thanks. I was curious with the infrastructure bill and the influx of federal monies coming in, if you think it's going to change the investment mix it all, or the focus of those investments? You know, more on innovation, electrification, those types of items.
Gregory, there is that bill has a lot of different categories in it, as you're probably well aware. Some of them are focused specifically on electrification. Some of the money that the state will get will be formula driven on electrification. Some of it would be discretionary grant, right? Where you have to, submit a grant application, and hopefully you'll be successful to draw those funds down. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done by USDOT and the different modal partners to be able to understand truly how we implement the various aspects of the funds. I will tell you that in some aspects of the bill, I would say it's perhaps unfortunate what the state is not going to receive, like, for example, in the bridge funding. We were a victim of a formula that actually penalized the state for doing a good job in keeping our infrastructure the way it is. And so, but as Gregory, it's a little too early. I think there's a lot more that needs to come from USDOT and guidance and so on before we're able to see kind of where we will see some benefits and, again, perhaps some missed opportunities.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for the question. Do we have any other questions from audience? And maybe before that, I want to take this opportunity just ask some questions on behalf of the students.
Sure.
As I introduced at the beginning, I know that you worked both in the private and the public sector. So from your point of view, when you compare private sector versus public sector, what are the huge difference, or what are the most significant difference?
Wow. So if you're a transportation professional, and I keep it very agnostic, right? I didn't say engineering, you could be in planning, you could be whatever. In the public sector side, you tend to be working in a lot of different projects, right? Because you're the client primarily. And it doesn't have to be state DOT. It can be the county, it could be the city or whatever, but you got your hand perhaps in a lot of different projects versus the private sector. You're only working on those projects that you're successful in winning, right? Or pulling down and being a contractor to do. So it could be just as rewarding because what the activities you're working on are kind of similar. It's just that in the public sector, it's a larger breadth. You're also involved in policy in the public sector more than you are in the private sector. You can have some input into the policy, but at the end of the day, the policy makers reside usually in the public sector.
Thank you so much for sharing this. We do have questions from students in the Cutter Tool too, and Zhaohui is currently in the classroom. So Zhaohui, could you please deliver the question to Secretary Thibault?
Okay, is this on?
It's on.
Okay. So, I have a question. With all the advancements in technology, I'm worried that too much technology will, make our transportation system more complicated in a way. I've driven a connected vehicle. It wasn't autonomous, but it wasn't as convenient as driving, a vehicle with less technology. But, at least I have the experience on that. And also, I think we should focus on hydrogen vehicles rather than electric vehicles. Hydrogen vehicles you can fill it up as quickly as you fill up a gasoline car. It's renewable, even though Agenda 21 doesn't list it as a renewable source. And the only thing it produces in emissions is water vapor, which would help on refilling our aquifers. And would give us the benefits of much needed rain. Thank you.
Yeah. So you had a couple of different, they're kind of a little different there. So I'll do the hydrogen one first. That's external, right? For us, it's what the marketplace is doing, right? They're the ones that tend to drive the development of the vehicles. Like, remember, for example, we've seen some of the other modes. Let's talk about the other modes. Shipping, for example. And I'm talking about vehicles, vessels, waterborne transportation. They have evolved a lot, right? From their use of fuel to liquefied natural gas, for example, is the kind of the nouveau thing that they're using, LNG. You've seen a lot of bus transportation have changed from CNG, LNG, electric. So I think there's the industry that's making these vessels, whatever these vehicles are, looking at what's out there, looking at what the market wants to use and utilize, what's available out there for fueling, right? So like, for example, we've been working with our port partners on those to provide the infrastructure to support LNG, for example. If they're getting new vessels coming in that are LNG, well, they need to have the refueling capability at those different ports. So again, it's externally driven. What we're trying to do is respond to that and to be as proactive as we can. I hate us having to be too reactive and then we're behind the curve, whether it be behind the curve for the needs of our residents and our visitors, whether it be behind the curve as it relates to other factors. So that's why you heard a lot of discussion on electrification, only because that's where the marketplace is going as it relates to the highway mode. As it relates to the first one, connected autonomous vehicles is a question of not if, it's a question of when. It's going to happen. We all have, I expect most of us on this Zoom call or in the classroom there, have a early version of a connected vehicle with the lane departure sensors, the backup sensors that you have. That's just the early phases of it. And as it continues to evolve, and it will continue to evolve, there is a tremendous potential for this state positively to be able to leverage that technology so that these connected automated vehicles improve safety, enhance mobility throughout the state.
Thank you so much for answering the questions. Zhaohui, do we have other questions in the classroom?
No, we're good here. Thank you.
All right.
No, not really. It's Friday afternoon, you come on, right? They're like,
Yeah, I think, for that question just asked, somebody probably will be afraid of using new technologies. But I think that's a question also towards to our transportation engineers, how to help them. First to figure out what help do they need, and then we can figure out a way how to help them in terms of design of the vehicle, in terms of using some programs to educate them about how to, adapt to the technologies better in that connected and automated environment. Yeah. So while waiting for the other questions from audience, we have another question on behalf of the student. So you mentioned, there could be opportunities in FDOT or maybe some agencies. What kind of advice would you give to a recent engineer graduates for their career development?
So if you're entering the transportation industry, right, and this is regardless of where you go, gang. If you go into the private sector, you go into the public sector, this advice works for all. Always say yes to opportunities that are given to you. You're gonna, especially in your entry level, when you start into, you're implementing everything you've learned, and you're going to continue to learn as you continue to develop your professionally and personally. When you're going to give an opportunities, you're going to have supervisors and managers and peers are going to ask you to do stuff. Try to say yes. So early on in my career, as you mentioned, I started in the private sector. I worked for a small little firm. There was 20 people. in the firm. And they were doing work for the DOTs up in the Northeast at the time. If you're in a small 20-member firm, you had to be jack of all trades or Jane of all trades. And so every time they would say, hey, Kevin, would you work on this parking garage? Yes. Kevin, can you help us develop a new railroad overpass and design the railroad? Yes. And so I kept saying yes over and over and over again. And that helped me not only in my professional development, but it helped me on in my career later on. I tell this to students sometimes when I'm in class. The very first day I started I started in Rhode Island, working for Rhode Island Department of Transportation on a project, which was converting basically a rails to a trail. We've done it here in Florida. A lot of states have done it, right? It was an abandoned railroad line. RIDOT had acquired the right-of-way from the old railroad and was converting it to a bike trail. And the firm I was working for was given the contract to survey it, locate the property, and see if there's any encroachments and so on. So I started on that project in January in Rhode Island. So what do you think the temperature was? It wasn't a beautiful 78 degrees or whatever it is here today. It was below freezing. There was 6 inches of snow on the ground, and I'm looking for the property corners, the old pins and iron rods in the ground that are probably 6, 8 inches below the surface. Needless to say, I had to dig through the snow, dig through the hard ground to find the corner. So therefore, I could then secure, ties. Remember all of us that done survey back in the day, right? So, but I didn't say no because I liked working on that stuff, even though my hands and feet were freezing. And so then later on, they said, hey, this guy never says no to anything. Let's give him, and he did a good job. So when they got another survey assignment later on, it was in the spring, and it was at Roger Williams Zoo, which was the second oldest zoo in the country, second oldest zoo in the country. And they were asking me to locate inlets and I was out there playing with the monkeys and the elephants and all that stuff. But it was in the spring. So everyone was envious of Kevin going out and doing that while they're in the office. So just think of saying yes all the time. That's the advice. Say yes when you can.
That's a great advice. I mean, there's always a reason for someone more successful in the career than others. Yeah, and for the students, when the professors ask you to do something, please always say yes too. Okay. So for audience, are there any more questions for Secretary Thibault?
Yes. Hi.
Yep.
Yeah, this is a Shell from USF.
I saw your microphone go off. I figured you had a question.
Oh, thank you. That's a great observation. Well, I really like your presentation and insights, and it's particularly to ACES Advanced Technologies. We are actually working with like US DOE and partnering with the state office, energy office, and the Tampa Bay Clean City Coalition and NREL, working on a project about electric vehicle and alternative fuel vehicle based evacuation plan. So our group was in charge of the EV evacuation, and what we found was that when the evacuation happens, the traffic patterns would be different from the regular traffic pattern, whereas the EV infrastructures are in regular scenarios when there is no emergency. EV infrastructures are mostly concentrated in urban areas, but for massive evacuation, for example, I actually drove like 17 hours from Tampa to Atlanta during Hurricane Irma, and the fueling was a big issue. In this kind of circumstances, lots of trips take place in some rural places where are not that many charging stations. So what's your perspectives about redundancy and backup plans for, in particular, for EV chargers during the evacuation scenarios?
So, yeah, so the focus on our master plan was on, a lot of it was on the emergency evacuation, as you mentioned, Chow. And so we're really focused on where are the gaps so that if we have another Irma, yeah, that was an excellent example, by the way. If we have another Irma, although there may be some potential on like Interstate 75 if you're heading north, right? Not so much on US 19, right? Up towards the Panhandle. So where are those gaps and how can the state work with our partners, not only in the public sector, but the private sector in filling in those gaps? There is a large contingent within the private sector who keeps raising their hand saying, we'll do it, we'll help out, but I don't see it happening. It's more voice right now than it is action. I need to see it actioning. I'm from Missouri. Show me, right? I need you to show me that you're going to put some of these infrastructure needs, and especially charging infrastructure, in your facilities. In the meantime, I can't wait for that, and I've got a plan for it. And so the guidance we get from USDOT as relates to electrification from this Jobs Act will help us tremendously and be able to not only position our resources, but leverage those federal resources that come down to help close those gaps. Right now, just to let you and a lot of people on probably this call know, I cannot use the federal funds on the interstate system. There's a prohibition on doing it in the interstate, on the rest areas. And they can't get rid of that prohibition because there's an industry and the private sector says, I can do it. Well, but they're not doing it. So I got to figure out another way to get there, right? Now I can do more on the turnpike system, and we will. You've already seen us do that in our service plazas, and we'll do more. But I'm trying to figure out other ways to get there.
I see. Well, thank you. Yeah, hope you could find other alternatives of or filling that gap.
Yeah. I saw Dr. Qinglu raised the hand earlier, and Dr. Qinglu is also in our department and working on the asphalt pavement area.
Oh, great.
Hi, Secretary Thibault. Thank you for your visionary presentation. I really enjoyed it. But my question actually is related to your previous comment. Given the rapid development and adoption of the new technology, like in computer science, information technology, data science, do you see or do you expect to see a significant change in the qualifications of these like new graduates going into the either private or public sector of transportation?
So one of the things that I've been mentioning, actually, I've done a lot of outreach to our university system here, especially the College of Engineering, whether it be at USF. I met with Dean Bishop not too long ago. You've heard me talk about that in the Cutter Advisory Board meeting. But I've done it at UCF, UF, FSU today. I was on the College Advisory Board for FSU earlier today. We need to cast a wider net on transportation professionals for the future. You know, traditionally, we've always casted the net in the civil engineering profession, right? Or in that kind of field, or the planner, right? But I think the future, we need to cast a wider net because I need electricals, I need computer, I need a lot of different group. If it's evolving with the way the technology is going, that we need to cast a wider net for our future transportation professionals. I'm pretty confident that if I met some of the entry-level engineers in your freshman, sophomore year, or I sat in and made a presentation in the statics and dynamics class, where they all participated, right? And said to them, have you ever thought about being in transportation? They're going to look at the civils, right? And say, oh, I mean, you must be talking to civils. No, I'm talking to you. You're in computer or you're in electrical. And then start talking about what we got going on. All of a sudden, I planted the seed, right? That's what we need to do. I think we need to start to plant that seed early on. So when we start to plant the seed of STEM, right, then we kind of take a little section of that and say, if you're thinking transportation, don't think it's only civil, by the way. It's these other areas as well.
Right. That's exactly the trend. Any other questions from audience? Thank you, Dr. Lu, by the way, for asking the question.
By the way, one of the questions you probably get as professors or as industry professionals from entry level or whatever, why did you choose this field? For me, I backed into it. I'm a civil, those of you know, I'm a civil, I'm a registered professional engineer. I thought I was going to get into environmental. When I went to school, I had minored in environmental engineering. I actually was the lab assistant in all the environmental classes my junior and senior year. And because the civil engineering department head at the time was the environmental, because as you know, sometimes it rotates, right? So at that time, I had good relationship with him. I thought I was going to go work at DEP or, local government agency, or like a Camp Dresser McKee, right, back in the day, or Metcalf and Eddie, if you remember those back in the day. And my first job opportunity was alumni looking for somebody as an entry-level transportation. I took the job because I needed a job right out of school, and I never went back because I said yes. Right? Yes.
Well, I teach a capstone design in transportation engineering here at USF, and most of the students in my class actually they come to this field actually because they like it. They like transportation and civil.
It's very broad, right? It's very broad.
Yeah,
But
Now the structures engineers will be the structures engineers guys, right? They know they're going to want to do structures. You kind of see them, right? You kind of know where they're going. But the others, they have more of a broader perspective, right? If we can kind of tap into that and get them to realize, God, there's a lot in this play space.
Yeah, transportation is very interdisciplinary, actually. Our students now at USF not only just taking courses from the civil engineering department, but also other departments like economics, like statistics, like computer science, etc., etc. So I think the knowledge base are expanding to meet the needs of the emerging transportation system. Yeah. To follow up the electrification question, actually, Secretary Thibault, I want to mention that, we received some funding from TRB to look into identify the optimal locations for the dynamic wireless charging facilities for the electrified transit system. And you mentioned that technology in your presentation. You also mentioned, in the infrastructure bill passed recently, there's a big chunk of money goes to electrification. So from the state duty point of view, will there be like discretional money, like a specific money for transit, for electrifying the transit system, and maybe using that technology to ensure the continuous operations? And meanwhile, that same technology embedded on the pavement may be also used by other type of vehicles. Can you?
Absolutely. But I think at a national level, that needs to be done probably at a more focal area, right? Whether it be FTA, FHWA, Turner Research, whatever it is, right? Maybe they look at that so they can do that evolution. For us, as relates to implementation, absolutely. It is, but as you know, it's not cheap, right? Pinellas has one, it was $500,000 just to do the one. Now, it's sort of like the flat screen TVs back in the day, right? They were really expensive. Now you can get them, and once they die, you just buy a new one, right? Because it's more, there's more of them out there. I expect as we implement more and as they evolve, the price point will come down and we'll be able to do more of those. But I offer that, I mentioned SunTrax as, our location there in Auburndale is really the opportunity to have OEMs and others take part of that. Right, so they can test those technologies while they don't need to do it in the lane and take away capacity, perhaps, as they put it in. Right, let's try it out in an environment here, and once we've worked out the kinks and communications and so on, then we can start deploying. And our thought would be in some of our freeway segments that maybe have express lanes or managed lanes, where we can use that corridor that's already separated as where you can charge, right? So you can move over to that lane and just charge in that lane.
Great. Thank you so much. Do we have more questions from audience? It's 2 minutes past 1 o'clock. So if not, I want to thank Secretary Thibault again for your time and for your informative and visionary presentation. Do you have any close remarks?
No, again, just for the students that are still hooked up here, I know a couple people had to drop off because of the time. Again, take every opportunity to say yes. There's so many opportunities that'll be out there in front of you. Learn to develop. One of the things that I try to do, I continue to develop myself in reading, both a leadership type of role and other things. So continue to develop yourself along the way. Here at the department, we do provide a lot of training opportunities.
Thank you so much. Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll see you next Friday. Thank you, Secretary.
All right. Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend too.